So here I'm going to tie a carp fly like it's sort of a suspended egg pattern. It's on a heavy gauge Scud hook in a size 10. I'm going to start with some medium dumbbell eyes in black and just secure these on with alternating wraps. They kind of slip on me and it takes a little bit longer, but I'm just monitoring to make sure that they're even and secure. This fly's been really fun. It doesn't look like much, but then it presents this like floating egg off the bottom, which gives it a really appealing look for a carp when they're coming by, while keeping the hook and the rest of the fly sort of nondescript and buried on the bottom. This is a headstand fly, so having those dumbbell eyes as close to the front as possible is important. So once that's secured, we're just gonna take the thread to the back of the hook. Looks like it's still slipping a little bit here, but doesn't need to be the most durable. These are lightweight flies. You're using them in close for the most part for the drag and drop. Next, I'm going to take some Chartreuse Egg yarn and double it over. I'm trying to get a pretty thick piece so that when I trim it, it poofs out just like you'd tie any glow bug or any egg. So I'm going to secure those into one hand and then take a bit of thick mono in the other and just tie a clinch knot in between my strand of egg yarn. You can't exactly see what I'm doing, but it's just a couple turn clinch knot through the strand of egg yarn and tighten. This will help it suspend. There's nothing much more to it except just moistening the mono as you cinch that knot down, just to get a really good secure bit. I don't bother gluing it or anything. It's fairly delicate and it doesn't really need to be secured for any reason. So once that's secured, looks like I'm still just fidgeting here. It's tough to get that. I was working with a fairly short piece of line. But once that's secured onto the clinch knot, I'm just going to trim the tag. And this is going to be tied in sort of down the hook shank. I try not to leave too much tag material on the thread. Again, the durability here isn't that important. I'm just trimming up the egg shape and trying to poof it out as much as possible. And this is where having enough egg yarn to begin with is really helpful. So I'd rather overdo it than underdo it and then trim it down as needed. Just a few finishing touches. Egg yarn always seems to take a couple tries for me to be happy with it. I always seem to find extra little strands. Sorry this is off camera here. There's not much to see though. Once it's back on camera, you'll see it's just sort of eggy shaped. And I'm not afraid for this to be too big, because it could look like a piece of corn or maybe even a dough ball or something, because a lot of times carp lakes have people that feed the carp as well, but that's taken on a nice kind of egg shape. Just round is the goal. So the key here is to not have it too long, but you want it to be tied in down the bend of the hook. I'm just going to adjust it after a couple loose turns to get it where I want it, and then loose turns down into the bend of the shank to orient that upwards. When this fly flips over, you want that to be sort of floating above the rest of your fly. Then I trim off the excess. It's pretty stiff mono, so I have some thicker cutters to avoid putting any damage into my scissors. Now I'm going to make a dubbing loop and just tie in a very nondescript, this is sort of a semi-seal leech olive dubbing that I'm going to add here. Just a quick, make the loop, open the tool up. I don't think the material matters that much. It has a little sparkle to it in this light, but it's fairly drab. I want something that's sort of buggy and has lots of loose fibers, so I try to align them before I put them into my loop. But at the same time, you don't want anything that draws too much attention away from the egg, because that's the real star of the show here. So throw that into the loop, whip it up, twist it up, and then I'm going to pick through it just a little bit to make it a little more even. I'm not too concerned about this. I think in an ideal situation, this just sort of blends in with the substrate on the bottom of the pond or river that you're fishing, and the fish may or may not even notice the rest of your fly, especially good when dealing with spooky carp. So we're just going to palmer our dubbing loop forward up until behind the eyes. My dubbing loop's a little short here, so I'm going to have to add a little bit more dubbing material just to get it the way I wanted it. But secure that in and then clip free the tag from your loop. Stroke all those fibers back, and then I'm going to add a little bit more material to kind of add to the head, so to speak, and then trim it up to get rid of the really, really long fiber bits, which is obviously what happens when you kind of align your fibers and stack them, so to speak, before they go into the dubbing brush. So I'm just adding a little bit more. I just want some more fuzz at the front. Eventually, after I whip finish, I'm going to pull some of that out, but for now, I want just a little more coverage at the front of the fly. And simply just tying it in and folding it over is good enough for here. That'll work for me. I don't really mind that. And now the last piece is going to add some legs which help the headstand prop up correctly. I'm using some shrimp pink legs just because I think they look kind of cool. But any color legs really work here. Just make sure you align them so that one leg goes off to the side and then you have the other leg goes off to the other side. So that's what I'm paying special attention to here. Cinching that down with a couple turns and then adding just a little more dubbing in a noodle this time, just to cover up the tie-in point from the legs. When this fly sits upside down, the dumbbell eyes will prop it the way you want, and then those rubber legs will kind of help tripod it into the orientation that keeps the egg suspended a little better. Last but not least is just a whip finish. I kind of fumble with it here, something about being on camera, but this part's easy. Just a couple whip finishes, and then make sure you seat the knot by just pulling on it after you take it out of the whip finish before you cut. I also tend to do an insurance whip finish at the end too, just in case. I'd like to fish this fly as long as possible, and the last thing I want is that thread to come undone. So once I cut it off, the fly's more or less good to go. I find a couple fibers that I don't like and go ahead to trim them, but I mean, that's strictly for my own reasons. That really has nothing to do with the fishability of it. So you see when it's upside down there, how that tripod's going to stand with the headstand orientation, and then that egg is going to kind of ride a little bit higher